Hi friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing how I did with my goals for 2021 and talk about my goals for 2022. It is that time of year. I always love doing this. I think it's really fun to get to do all of my end of year content, look at the best of what happened this year, look forward to things I'm anticipating for next year. And this goals video is always fun to do because I get to look back at what I said at the beginning of the year that I was going to do. And then we can see like how much of it I actually did. And then I can set goals for the year going forward. So I'm going to start by briefly reviewing the goals that I had set for myself in 2021. I'm going to tell you up front, like I did not succeed at all of them. Heather will not be shocked. This morning I went back and rewatched that video that I made. Oh man, I had lofty goals. I met some of them. It wasn't all bad, but you'll see what I mean. 2021, I had set a Goodreads goal of reading at least 200 books, which I knew was going to be easily achievable for me. I blew right through that, so that I achieved easy peasy. I also talked about that a big change I was making for 2021 was starting to plan ahead of time the genres that I would read with my patrons. And yes, we've done that all year. It's been fantastic. We are continuing to do that with some tweaks moving into 2022. Then I said that I was going to limit myself to 8 to 10 books a month for review. Have I done that? No. I 100% have not done that at all. Like I have read so many books for review. I did not do well with this goal. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna limit it. I'm not gonna accept very many things. I have gotten better at saying no to stuff, but I still say yes to too much. And like you'll see when we eventually get to my yearly stats video in January, I read way more for review than I had planned at the beginning of the year, so I knew going in that was going to be fail. Then I had a goal that I forgot I set until I watched this video, which was to read 5 books a month from my TBR shelf. I think I almost immediately forgot that this was even a thing. I probably have ended up reading close to that in most months, but it was certainly not on purpose. So yeah. Totally had forgotten about that one. Then I set some reading challenges for myself for the year, and you guys have been seeing me kind of track that in my monthly wrap-ups where you'll see how many books out of whatever number that I've completed. So we'll review briefly what those categories were and how I have done with them so far. I will say it's still early in December, so it's possible I might read like maybe 1 or 2 more of the books on these lists, but like this will give you a pretty good vibe. So first up, I had a classics TBR for the year. I wanted to read 8 classics, and some of these I filled in later in. So at the beginning of the year, I said I wanted to read Middlemarch, which I read, The Mysteries of Udolpho, which I have not read, a book by one of the Bronte sisters, probably Tenant of Wildfell Hall, which I did read. It was one of my favorite books of the year. Absolutely loved it. I wanted to read a book by Octavia Butler, which I did. I read Parable of the Sower. I loved it. I wanted to read a book by Jane Austen. I'm hoping this month to read Northanger Abbey. We'll see if I'm able to get to it. I wanted to read a book by Angela Carter. I did. I read The Bloody Chamber, and it is also one of my favorite books of the year, so that was definitely a success. I wanted to read Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. Also, one of my favorite books of the year. So I read that. I loved it. You know, it's interesting. I think I did a good job of picking classics for myself. I generally really enjoyed the classics that I selected for this TBR, and then I left one open where I could pick whatever I wanted, and I ended up making this The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, which I read. I hated it when I read it in high school. Reading it now, I liked it. I think I gave it 4 stars. Then I also set a challenge for 9 sci-fi fantasy books that I wanted to read during the year that were specifically about expanding the breadth of my knowledge in sci-fi fantasy, and this included 1 reread. So on this list was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I did read it, I gave it 5 stars, and I actually did a whole read along on my channel for the whole Farseer trilogy, so that was a success. I wanted to read The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I read it, I gave it 4 stars. That was one of the book club picks for my Patreon book club 1 month, so that worked out nicely. I wanted to reread Dune by Frank Herbert, which I hadn't read in like 11 years and it had been a favorite. It continues to be a favorite for me. I really enjoyed my reread. And then I wanted to read the entirety of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which I did, and we did a read along on my channel and it was great and I loved them. I'm so glad I did it. I also said that I wanted to at least start the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan this year, which I did. I read The Lightning Thief and I liked it. I also read book 2 in that series, but I did not complete the series. Lastly, I said that I wanted to look at the Times 100 Best Sci-Fi Fantasy Books and pick 2 non-Western titles from that list to read. I think I forgot that I said that I wanted them both to be non-Western because one of them was definitely Western, so slight fail on that, but I didn't do too bad. They were both from that list, and one of them was non-Western. I read A Hero Born by Jin Yong, which I liked pretty well. I gave it 3 stars. The translation wasn't perfect, but I did read on and read the second book in that series and really loved it quite a lot, so I do plan to continue on with that series. They were written in the 50s and just recently have been translated into English, so there are classics of Chinese kung fu fantasy, lots of soapy melodrama. That was a good pick. And then also from that Times 100 list, but Western, which I had forgotten the specifics of what I said, but I ended up reading The Dark is Rising by Susan Cooper, which I wasn't a huge fan of. This is a classic of children's fantasy, and yeah, I didn't love that one. The last thing for the reading challenge that I'd set was to catch up with or complete some series, and I said in the video that there were 4 series I wanted to do. I think after making that video I added a 5th one. The irony is that the only one I actually completed was the fifth one. The 5th one that I added. I have not done well with this and I will not be doing this series challenge for myself in 2022. So I wanted to catch up on the Sci-Changeling series by Nalini Singh. I only read 2 books in the series, so I am not at all caught up. I said that I wanted to catch up in Pierce Brown's Red Rising series because I hadn't read Iron Gold and Dark Age yet. I still have not read them. They're really long. So I still haven't read them. I said that I wanted to finish up the Grisha books by Leigh Bardugo that I hadn't yet read, which would be Crooked Kingdom and her short story collection, and then maybe the latest one that came out. I can't think of what it's called right now, but I have not read any of those, so I didn't do that. I also said I wanted to finish the Three Dark Crown series by Kendara Blake. I have not read any of those. And then after filming the video, I decided to also add on finishing up the Winter Night series by Catherine Arden with A Girl in the Tower and The Winter of the Witch, and that I did finish. So out of all of these books that I said I wanted to read, I read 4, so that was kind of a failure. It's fine. Then we get to the other things that I completely forgot that I set some of these goals for myself. I'll just say that. So I said that I wanted to work on my writing this year and actually finish a story. I said in the video, this year COVID will be less of an issue. How wrong I was. So have I done any writing at all this year? No, I have not. I've not done any writing. So that for sure went by the wayside. I also said that I wanted to start offering manuscript critiques. I mentioned that I had offered a couple for the Romancing the Runoff fundraiser, and I did complete those. I think it was a good experience. I enjoyed doing it. Honestly, I just haven't had the time. So that is still something that I would be interested in doing. Like if the right person approached me, I would be open to it. I've just been so busy. I haven't like told people that that's a thing I would do. But I guess if you're watching this and you are an aspiring author and would be interested in working with me to do a manuscript critique, feel free to reach out and maybe we can work something out. I also said that I was working on workshops for creators. Yeah, that just like didn't happen. Things got busy. Maybe one day I'll make that happen, but it hasn't been a priority. It's been a busy year and I have so much on my plate. I think I tend to overextend myself and think I can do more than I actually can. So looking back at all of my goals for the year, it was definitely a mixed bag. There were quite a few things that I didn't do or forgot that I even set as goals for myself, but I did okay on some of them. So hopefully I do better hopefully I do better with my goals for 2022. So with that said, let's talk about my 2022 goals. First up, we'll start by talking about Goodreads. I do always set a goal on Goodreads, but I always like to set it low enough that I am positive I can easily achieve it given how much I read. This year, I may even hit 400 books. Like, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna be close to that. So my Goodreads goal for next year is gonna be 250 books. That's something I can reasonably achieve. So that's what it's gonna be. I do have new reading challenges for 2022 of specific book titles that I wanna read. So I will put that at the end of this video after I talk about the other goals, but I am coming back with it. But this year there's just going to be a classics TBR and a sci-fi fantasy TBR, 8 books each, which I think is very manageable. One of the things I want to do in 2022 though is focus more on my Patreon. So at the beginning of last year, I was still in the process of trying out YouTube memberships, which I did for a while. I want to say like 9 months to a year. I tried it out and I just don't prefer it. It ended up by the end that the only people supporting me on memberships were also supporting me on Patreon, and it was a lot of extra work. And you know, I tried it and I just like quietly sort of did away with it. So at this point, I am just fully committed to Patreon. I love the community that I'm building over there. So I'm hoping in 2022 to just really focus on what we're doing over on Patreon because I think it's exciting. Coming up on the end of the year, I made some changes to the tiers that were available and some of the perks, which I'm excited about those changes. I've done away with a couple of levels. We've created a new level. One new thing that is now available starting at the Truth Witch level, which is $8 a month, is that patrons are able to nominate and vote on books that they want to see me do a reading vlog for. So that I think is going to be really fun. We're going to be starting that off in January. There's a poll running right now for it, and it's looking like Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim might be the winner. So that might be the book that I'll be vlogging in January. And so I think that's going to be really fun of patrons having the opportunity to be a part of deciding the direction my content is going. I want to start creating more behind the scenes content in the new year for patrons so that they can get a little bit more of a look into some of the things with my creative process. I know not everybody's interested in it, but some of them are, and so I want to do that. And then, because I did a poll of the patron community, and one of the things that some people had expressed interest in is really wanting more opportunity for community building, of building friendships and getting to know each other. And so something that we're going to be doing that I'm excited for is we're doing patron hosted meetups on Discord. So one of my amazing patrons, Beth, has offered to host a weekly hour-long meetup, and I'll drop in when I'm able to. With my schedule, I just can't do it every week, but she's going to do it for an hour every week, and so patrons can hang out, do through voice or video chat and talk about stuff, and then we'll see how it goes. Maybe it'll grow if people eventually want to offer to run other things, or we do like themed meetups. I'm open to that, but I really want to focus on building that community and making it a really vibrant space for people to connect with each other and connect with other book lovers. And yeah, I just think it's really exciting. I think we've got some fun stuff that's going to be coming in the new year. Had to change my battery out, but yeah, I'm just really excited about what's happening over there. I think there's going to be a lot of fun stuff coming in 2022. And one thing I do want to say is, for those of you who have supported me on Patreon, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. It truly means the world to me. And honestly, that Patreon support and the growth of the Patreon support is what makes it possible for me to continue making content full-time, which is what I'm doing. And the reason that I've been able to continue doing it instead of like looking for a different kind of job is that I have seen the Patreon and other things grow, and I'm hoping to see that continue to grow. So I guess this is just to throw out there, if you are watching this and you love my content, you watch my content a lot and appreciate it, even if you're not that interested in like a monthly book club or the community aspects of the Patreon, if it's something you're financially able to do and you want to support what I do, just know that it does make a huge difference in making it possible for me to continue doing this full time, because I do actually work full-time hours on YouTube and the podcast that I run, between filming and editing and reading books for review and writing reviews and all of the behind the scenes work that you don't necessarily always get an eye to, putting out 2 to 3 videos a week, organizing live streams and discussions, which we're going to talk more about. All of those things are what I do as a job, and I love this. I love what I do here. This is not meant to be high pressure. If what you want to do and can do is just watch my videos, that's great. I appreciate that as well. this is more for if there's anybody out there who has thought that they would like to support the work that I'm doing, but maybe just hasn't been as interested in the community piece of it or the book club piece of it, you can be as involved or uninvolved as you want to be. So just throwing that out there. Not something that I talk in depth about very often, but this seemed like the time of year to do it if I was going to. And one thing to note is if you are interested in joining the Patreon, right now for the month of December through the very beginning of January, I think like January 3rd, I am running a special offer. All existing patrons as of when it ends, like January 3rd or whatever, will be getting a mail from me with a handwritten note and a bookmark that I'm currently designing. This does include my international patrons. I do mail these internationally if you're interested in joining, so that's the thing that I'm doing. And then for new and upgrading patrons, you will have the opportunity to submit a request for a personalized book recommendation for a live stream that I'll be doing on Patreon, which will be really fun. So this will be like those hyper specific book recommendations if you're looking for something with a certain genre or trope combination or whatever it is that you're looking for. If you want to send me a link to your Goodreads, you can, so I can check and make sure it's not something you've already read, but that's going to be available to any new and upgrading patrons between now and January 3rd. So in case you're interested, the link is always in the video description down below, but huge thank you to all of you who support me in whatever way you're able to, whether it is through Patreon or whether it's just through watching my videos and interacting and commenting. All of it means a lot and makes a big difference, so thank you. Let's talk about the rest of my goals for the year. I am not going to try to set these kind of specific goals as far as numbers of books for review every month because that was such a failure last year. What I am going to say is that I'm going to stop requesting very many e-arcs from NetGalley. And part of this is that I just don't enjoy reading books on my phone, reading books digitally, unless they're very short books or if they're romances and short. So I am going to be limiting myself to only requesting like novellas or very short fiction and really minimizing it. Because I just would prefer to have the physical arcs or audio arcs. I do love the fact that NetGalley now has audiobooks for review and I'm leaning into that, but I'm planning to request a lot fewer and accept a lot fewer of them just because I don't enjoy it. It's not fun for me. So I am also planning on accepting less YA for review. I have found in the last year that I've just been reading less of it, and when I do read it, I'm pickier about what I like. When I look at my list of favorite books for the year, which is already only a small percentage of books that I'm reading, the majority of them are targeted at an adult audience. There's only, I think, like 3 that are YA and maybe four. Okay, there's like 4 for YA, although a couple of those are crossover titles. So yeah, I'm not enjoying it in the way that I used to. There are exceptions. I will still take some of it, but I'm going to be significantly limiting how much YA I'm accepting in the new year. A lot of my other goals are really about the kind of content that I want to make in 2022. I've been thinking quite a bit about this. You know, I've been on YouTube now for 4.5 years, which is a long time. And I'm in this place where I've been thinking a lot about plans for the future. Like, where do I want to go? Where do I want to take the channel? What are my ideas for where we could go moving forward? And so that's something I've been pondering on really all year, but I think especially this time of year, moving into the end of the year and January, and everybody's thinking about New Year's. So here are a few of my thoughts. One thing that you may have noticed in the last couple months I've been doing more of is hosting discussion live streams on my channel. I enjoy doing them. I think I'm a pretty good moderator. I like bringing people together to talk about a topic, and you guys really seem to enjoy those videos. I'm finding that they do very well, and there are so many interesting voices in our community, so that is something that I plan to continue doing moving forward. I've been calling it Let's Discuss. So that is a series that you can continue to expect probably about like once a month that I'll bring together a group of people to talk about something interesting. The thing that I want to add moving into 2022, and I hadn't actually thought about this until I recently was hanging out with a friend of mine, Jocelyn from Yogi with a Book, and we were talking and she was like, well, have you thought about doing more interviewing authors? And I was like, well, the thing is like single interviews with one author just don't tend to do that well on YouTube unless it's like a big name author. There's just fewer people interested. But something that I think might be fun is to host panel discussions on a topic with groups of authors. And I'll come up with some kind of a clever title for this series, but that's something that I would like to do periodically moving into 2022 and kind of see how it goes. So I'm not going to commit to doing many of them, just kind of want to gauge what the response is, but that is something that I'm thinking would be cool, is to select a group of authors to talk about a particular topic and then moderate it on my channel. So if you guys would be interested in seeing that from me, let me know in the comments down below. I just think it could be really fun and interesting. So that's something that I have as a goal for 2022. In the new year, I generally would like to do a few, at least, discussion videos. And, you know, I've seen Mara from Books Like Woe do things similar to what I'm thinking, and we'll see how it goes. I'm going to kind of try it out and maybe do some experimenting with content with this. But I have a few different topics that I want to think and talk more about, and I've got books that I'm collecting to read around those topics. So I'm hoping to, a few times in the year, maybe like 3 or 4 times, do a thing where I read several books about this topic and then do a video discussing whatever it is. So that's a thing that I would like to try out in the new year. And then the last thing is, I think it would be fun to do a couple of videos where I make lists of books. I know I've done some things reacting to big lists that other people have made, like the Times 100 best sci-fi fantasy books or whatever. I've done some of this with Ashley and other people, but I would like in some way to curate some of my own lists. So whether that's my favorite sci-fi fantasy books, or whether that's that I get together with a group of a few other booktubers and we kind of curate some of these different lists, or maybe a combination of the two, but in some way, I'd like to do that in 2022. I think it'd be an interesting project. That is pretty much my goals, aside from the specific reading challenges I have. So we're gonna move into that. This is going to be my classics and sci-fi fantasy TBRs for the year. So I picked 8 books in each category that I want to read at some point in the year. Let's begin with classics. The first book going on my classics TBR is a classic nonfiction title. This is Black Reconstruction in America, 1860 to 1880 by W.E.B. Du Bois. I started reading this with Jess Owens at one point. I read the first few chapters and then we kind of stalled out. We were busy. It's a pretty dense book and I think requires time to really pay attention to what you're reading, but this is something I want to read. I love what I've read of it so far, and I think it's an important book, an important piece of nonfiction. So I am officially putting this on my classics TBR for 2022. There is one book that I am rolling over from 2021 that I know I'm not going to get to before the end of the year, but I do still want to read it, and that is The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe. So this is one of the progenitors of the Gothic romance genre, and it's something that I would like to read, and it's just so long that I kept putting it off, and I think I put it off till too long in the year. So in 2022, I want to make this happen, and I'm going to try to make this happen earlier in the year so that I actually get to it. One of my favorite books is a classic that I haven't reread in quite a while, and I'd like to do a reread in 2022, so I'm putting that on this list, and it is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I really love this. I read this for the first time when I was like 10, I think. Not that I really understood everything I was reading, but I reread this several times through the years, and it is one of my favorite books, so it seems about time to do a reread. I also have one that I could have put on my sci-fi fantasy list, but I'm not. I'm putting it on my classics list because I think she is entering canon of modern classics. I want to read Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler. Last year I read Parable of the Sower. I really loved it, and I want to finish this duology, so I'm putting it officially on my TBR for the year. I eventually want to read everything from Octavia Butler, but I feel like it's going to be a multi-year project for me just because her books are pretty intense and they're not ones that I can easily read back to back, so pacing myself. The next book on my classics TBR is Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence. I have never read this, but I would like to. I know this was always like a very scandalous book back in the day. I don't know if I will like it or not, but I want to give it a try. I we'll see. It's like, this is a notorious classic, and I think for a reason. I don't know a whole lot about the plot, to be honest, but I have a copy, it's beautiful, and I would like to read it, so I'm putting it on the list. And then lastly, I've got 3 installments in the Penguin Vitae collection that I've been acquiring a few books from. These are modern American classics in these really pretty editions. I've bought several of them in the past year or so and haven't read a lot of them, so I'm putting 3 of them on my classics TBR for 2022. The first one is The Women of Brewster Place by Gloria Naylor. So this one says it weaves together the stories of 7 women living in Brewster Place, a bleak inner city sanctuary, creating a powerful, moving portrait of the strengths, struggles, and hopes of Black women in America. It was a National Book Award winner, and it's a modern classic. It came out in 1980. I have always meant to read from Shirley Jackson, and so 2022 is going to be the year that I finally do. I'm going to be reading We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I have a couple books from her on my TBR, but this one I have in this beautiful edition, and it's not very long. I could use a couple of shorter classics. It says, Shirley Jackson's beloved Gothic tale of a peculiar girl named Mary Cat and her family's dark secret takes readers deep into a labyrinth of dark neurosis. Sounds really interesting. Again, I've been wanting to read from Shirley Jackson. It is time for me as a burgeoning horror reader. The final classic going on my TBR for the year is Winter in the Blood by James Welch. This came out in 1974 and it is written by a Native American author. It says, the narrator of this beautiful, often disquieting novel is a young Native American man living on the Fort Belknap Reservation in Montana. Smart, sensitive, and haunted by personal tragedy, he searches for something that will connect him to the lands of his ancestors, his once proud heritage, and Montana's vastness. So yeah, a classic from an Indigenous author, definitely one I want to read. That is my classics TBR for 2022, 8 books going on the list. Moving on, let's talk about the sci-fi fantasy books that I want to read in 2022. There's one book that is sort of getting rolled over from 2021. This was originally on my series finisher list that I never got to, but I do really want to read this. So I'm putting Iron Gold by Pierce Brown on this list. This is the first book in the second Red Rising trilogy. I've read the first trilogy, really loved it, and I do want to continue. These are just really long, but I feel like I'm going to love them. Maybe I will also get to Dark Age this year. I would like to, but I'm not officially putting it on the TBR, but at least Iron Gold I want to read this year. In 2021, I put the first book in the Stormlight Archive on my TBR. So for 2022, we are putting the second book of the Stormlight Archive on my TBR. This is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. I did like Way of Kings. I do want to continue on with the series, so we're gonna make it happen. These are such long books. I feel like they're good picks for a yearly TBR. For another quite lengthy book in a series that I would like to start in 2022 is Empire of Silence by Christopher Riocchio. I've heard fantastic things about this. I know my friend Leanna from Leanna's Library has been reading these books and absolutely raving about them. So I want to at least start the series this year, maybe continue with them, but at least start it. These are like sci-fi, epic sci-fi space operas. I don't know a lot of details, but I hear great things. The final large book going on this TBR officially for the year is Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. This is book 1 in the Live Ship Traders series. I actually would like to read this entire trilogy and maybe do a read along with them at some point in the year, but for this TBR, I'm putting Ship of Magic on it. So eventually I want to read all the Realm of the Elderlings books, but I gotta pace myself. They are long. The rest of the books on this TBR are much shorter. One of them is a modern book and the others are kind of classics of the sci-fi fantasy genre. The more modern one is Nine Fox Gambit by Yoon-Ha Lee. I have been wanting to read this book for a long time, and so one way or another I'm gonna make it happen this year. I've heard really, really good things about them. I did read Dragon Pearl last year by Yoon-Ha Lee. That's their middle grade book, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic and really in-depth world building for a middle grade. I don't know that I've read it, so I've heard that this one is dense, but it's also pretty short, so I want to try it. Then we have books that are a little bit older in the genre. One is Dream Ships by Melissa Scott. This is a sci-fi book from the 90s, I want to say. I've really been wanting to read more from some of the women writers in sci-fi fantasy who don't always get talked about as much, and so this is one book that I'm putting on my TBR. I found this used copy of this book, and Melissa Scott is also an out gay woman who wrote some books with her longtime partner as well. So yeah, I want to read from her and see how this goes. So this one has a heroine who is a freelance space pilot with her crew, Crazy Imra Vaughn and the enigmatic Red. She signs on to find the lost brother of a mysterious woman. And yeah, I don't know. It's a sci-fi book. Sounds interesting. I also want to read The Female Man by Joanna Russ. This sounds interesting. I read a short story this past year by her that I think is set in the same world as this book, and it made me really interested in it. She was an early feminist sci-fi writer, and this book, when did this come out? 70s or 80s? Yeah, this came out in 1975, so it's at this point kind of a classic. And it says, living in an altered past that never saw the end of the Great Depression, Janine, a librarian, is waiting to be married. Joanna lives in a different version of reality. She's a 1970s feminist trying to succeed in a man's world. Janet is from While Away, a utopian Earth where only women exist. And JL is a warrior with steel teeth and cat-like retractable claws from an Earth with separate and warring female and male societies. When these four women meet, the results are startling, outrageous, and subversive. I know this is kind of a controversial book, but I'm very, very interested to read it and curious to see what I take from it reading from an early feminist sci-fi writer. And the final book going on my sci-fi fantasy TBR for 2022 is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. I have heard fantastic things about this, and I've been wanting to read more from Ursula K. Le Guin. I did read a couple of the Earthsea books when I was younger, but that's really all I've read. And this one I think is sci-fi. It says, yeah, sci-fi, and it won Hugo and Nebula Awards. A lone human ambassador is sent to the icebound planet of Winter, a world without sexual prejudice where the inhabitants' gender is fluid. His goal is to facilitate Winter's inclusion in a growing intergalactic civilization, but to do so, he must bridge the gulf between his own views and those of the strange, intriguing culture he encounters. Sounds really fascinating, and when did this one publish? Ooh, wow. Okay, and this one originally came out in 1969, so yeah, we've got a couple of like pretty early versions of female sci-fi writers. Other than like Mary Shelley, I think is the most well-known early sci-fi writer, but yeah, really excited to read those. That is the 8 books going on my 2022 official sci-fi fantasy TBR. Okay, I feel like this is going to be a much longer video than I had originally anticipated, but hopefully it's fun and interesting and gives you a little bit of a look at how I've done this year, what my plans are moving into next year, and I would love to hear from you all in the comments down below. Let me know any of your thoughts or feelings on anything I talked about in this video. And for your question of the day, tell me what is one of your book-related goals for 2022. Do you have anything specific? It can be whatever you want, but something related to the books or the bookish internet, or if you're a content creator, something with that. Let me know in the comments down below what one of your goals is. If you guys like this video, it helps if you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.